My name is Amber and I'm from the Local Government Capacity Centre, and I'm really pleased to welcome to you what is our final learning session as part of our winter learning programme. So today's session is on skills and capacity building for place shaping in local government. So to tell you a little bit more about ourselves, so the Local Government Capacity Centre was launched in May last year, and we are here to help develop, curate and design well-structured and accessible offers for local government. And as part of our early products that we are beginning to develop, we've brought to you this winter learning programme, and we also ran a similar session within the summer. So we've got a message here from our CEO, Peter Denton. And as you can see from this, he's absolutely committed to ensuring that Homes England supports your works and shares your expertise and skills to help get homes built. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. Now, before I hand over to Pooja Agrawal, Chief Executive of Public Practice, we are absolutely thrilled to be able to announce that together with the department, Homes England is able to support the expansion of public practice. And I'm going to hand over now to Pooja to talk a little bit more about that and what that might mean for local government. Okay, over to you, Pooja.
Great, thank you so much, Amber, and a very, very warm welcome from me, Pooja Agrawal, the Chief Exec of Public Practice. We're going to talk more about this sort of big announcement, but if we can have the slides up, please. So I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda for today, just so you have an idea of what this morning is looking like. So to start, I'm going to do a quick introduction to public practice, just so you understand more about who we are and what we do. And then I'm going to give you a sort of high level couple of case studies just to really get it into life and just so you'll really understand more about us. I'm then going to launch a new survey today, and more about that very soon. And that is, again, with support from Homes England and the department. And then we're really, really lucky to be joined by 3 officers today, 3 people whom we placed in the public sector through the programme, and they will be talking to you about their unique backgrounds and skills and how they worked in their local authorities. We really believe in collaboration and working with the third sector, with the private sector, and we really think it was really important to have a voice here today representing the private sector. So we're joined by Paul Mumford from Urban Civic, and he is going to give a bit of his response to what he hears from this morning. There is going to be plenty of time for question and answers, about half an hour, so please feel free to just continue to ask questions in the chat. Our team will try and respond as well as we go, and but yeah, we'll pick them up in the end. So I'm going to start with who we are. So next slide, please. So we are a social enterprise with a mission to build the public sector's capacity to improve the quality, equality and sustainability of places. We were established in 2017, so we're quite young. It's just been just over 4 years since we've been running. Next slide, please. And next. And so fundamentally, what we do is we find, select and place built environment professionals into local authority teams. We use local authority as quite an all-encompassing term, and by that we mean local authorities, local government and public sector organisations more widely. To date, we have been working in the southeast and the east of England and London, but this is obviously about to change with the announcement today. If you can go to the next slide, I'm just going to break it down in a little bit more detail about what we mean. So when we're talking about finding, we at the moment run bi-yearly call-outs to attract built environment professionals from a whole range of backgrounds and skills. We really, truly believe in the impact you can have on places and communities by working in the public sector, and we really advocate for that public service. Every round, we tend to get, on average, about 200 applications for our programme. Next slide, please. We then move on to the kind of selection phase. So we work with our local authorities to really understand their gaps, what skills that they're missing. We understand the design of their team. We help them shape the right job description and help them pitch the job right. In parallel, for the candidate side, we undertake a rigorous 3-stage recruitment process and shortlist the candidates. We We take a very inclusive recruitment process, and we're very happy to talk about that in a bit more detail later. Next slide, please. We frame the roles across 12 discipline types, and of course we know that there's so many overlaps across these different disciplines, but it's a really helpful framework for us to work with and to begin the conversations with both the authorities and the candidates. Next slide, please. Based on people's experiences, skills, salary, location, and more, we match the candidates into the authorities, and then we call these candidates associates. It's worth noting that the authorities they directly employ these associates in-house as officers for a year, because we truly believe in this embedding of that knowledge within the local authority. Most of the people we bring in are from the private sector, and we just make sure to help them transition into the public sector. And we do that by supporting this cohort, which tends to be about 20 to 25 people, through a supporting learning and development program that we curate and manage every other Friday for the cohort. Next slide, please. And the next slide. And in addition to that, we think from our previous session here last week, the importance of collaboration and cross-authority learning came across really, really strongly. And we've created those opportunities for those spaces, for those opportunities beyond our associates, beyond the cohort, including officers from local authorities we're working with, through a whole variety of different activities, including our officer network, events, and various publications. So I'm going to very quickly just talk at a high level about authorities we've worked with. So just starting with Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Services. Over the years, we've placed 6 different officers across 6 different cohorts. And what's really interesting to see here is the range of different disciplines we've brought together. So a combination of community engagement, urban design, planning policy, and digital and data skills. We're going to hear in more detail from Nissa this afternoon, but on the next slide, a key outcome just to share was the Greater Cambridge Digital Local Plan. It's a really ambitious project, and it was a joint effort across lots of different departments in the local authority, and the associates worked as part of a bigger team, bringing their expertise together. Next slide, please. Another example is Epping Forest District Council. That's one of the 5 authorities collaborating on the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town. Again, over the years, we've placed a whole range of different expertise. A key thing to note here, given this garden town, is around landscaping and ecology skills, but also urban design and planning. We know from the environmental bill, this is quite a key concern for a number of local authorities, and we've been able to bring that particular expertise to work with sustainability expertise. And we'll hear from Tara Bolade later, who will be talking specifically about her multidisciplinary background, including design and sustainability. And then we thought we would just touch on, not going to steal the thunder and let Tara talk about that in more detail. But we also thought it would be worth talking about Oxford City Council. Post-COVID, we know that town centre recovery is such a key priority for a number of authorities, and of course with the Levelling Up agenda announcements this week. So we worked quite closely with the council to bring those particular skills around town centre regeneration, and we have placed around 5 associates over the last few years, and a key project that they worked on was Broadmeadow. Initially, it was a meanwhile space to help increase footfall in town centres, but actually, given the success of the project, it ended up becoming a longer term project, and it paved the way for a more permanent county council scheme this year. It's really interesting to note that the public consultation of this, about 87% of over 1,000 respondents said that the scheme had a really positive impact on the town centre, and this is something that the council are, of course, really proud of. So just to touch on quickly on the impact of public practice to date. We've placed over 200 associates across 50 authorities in the East, South East, and in London. Next slide, please. And what's been interesting to see is actually most of the people we play have stayed on in the public sector after their first 12 months. And for us, we see that as a really positive impact, where we're fundamentally building that capacity of the public sector. Next slide, please. Most authorities also come back to us, which is obviously brilliant, and we continue to shape those relationships. And what's been really brilliant to see is over the years, us being able to build those teams over time where you have multiple people, alumni and associates working with similar line managers and officers and building up that capability in-house. Next slide. We are really committed to equality, diversity and inclusion, and I touched on our inclusive recruitment process before. As a cohort, we always seem to be to reach above and beyond the actual sector, as you can see here, but we don't think that's good enough. So we are taking a very data-led approach. In the next slide, we're looking at actually how our associates compare to the communities we serve, and this is an ongoing process and something we continue to do. Next slide, please. We're really proud to work across the sector. So we work with the private sector and the third sector, and we've got a variety of supporters here, as you can see on the screen, including Connected Places Catapult, the GLA, RTPI, Historic England, Dentons, KCA, L&Q and Barclay Group. And next slide, please. And today, we're really, really excited to announce, as Amber alluded to earlier, to receive funding from Homes England and support from the department to really expand our operations across the country. We thank Homes England and DLUP for their support, which will really help us work with authorities across the country who we know are really, really struggling with the lack of capacity and being able to actually deliver the ambitions of place shaping on the ground. But we also know that different parts of the country have very different barriers and needs, and not one solution fits all. So we're going to go through a consultation phase now to make sure we can respond to different places in different ways. And as part of that today, we're really pleased to launch our resourcing and skills survey right now, and there should be a link in the chat soon. So it's a really, really quick survey. It's going to take you about 5 or 10 minutes of your time, and hopefully you shouldn't need to look anything up. And this survey, we know we know lots of local authorities are under-resourced, but this will really understand specifically what the skills gaps are in particular places, but also the impact this has on officers and your teams across England. Anyone working in what we say place shaping and planning in local government is welcome to take the survey. So it might be planning, regeneration, infrastructure, transport, landscape, data, digital, anywhere, housing, anything where you are really making an impact on place. We really encourage you to take the survey now. The data we get from this anonymized data will be shared publicly and will be shared with institutions, including government, of course, but also for public practice. It will help us understand how we can help you in a very place-specific response. So we encourage you actually to feel free to take the survey during this session. And like I said, it shouldn't take very long to do. So we're going to move on to the next part of today, and you can stop hearing from me because it probably gets a bit boring after a bit, but we're going to invite a number of our officers and associates to present what they have done in their placements. So we're going to start with, if we can move on to the next slide, please. We're going to start with Tara Bolade. So Tara is a director at Bolade Design Studio. She's a public practice alumna, and she's also our board observer. She's a co-founder of Paradigm Network, sits on a number of design review panels, and is part of the advisory committee for Guy Streets and Thomas Charity on Urban Health Initiative. I will let her introduce herself in terms of what her role was and what she did. And you're going to hear 3 different case studies. They've got about 10 minutes each, so it's a really quick overview. So over to you, Tara.
Thank you so much, Pooja. Yeah, thanks for giving an overview. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Next slide, please. So, apologies, I was going to give an overview once so this is it anyway. So I come from an architectural background, as Pooja has alluded to, and I was placed through public practice in 2019 in the Harlow and Gilson Garden Town. And my role really focused on leading the development of the Garden Town sustainability guidance and checklist alongside my colleagues across all partner authorities. The Garden Town was designated in 2018 and is a partnership between 5 authorities, including 2 county councils, Essex and Hertfordshire County Councils, and 3 district authorities, Harlow, Epping Forest, and East Herts. Across the Garden Town, still staying with this page, across the Garden Town, I'll just speak very high level over the project itself, but more importantly, how I worked alongside my colleagues across each of the authorities. There are 4 key strategic sites, so for overview, there are 4 key strategic sites, which over the next 20 plus years will become home to 20,000 new homes and, of course, the associated infrastructure. These strategic sites are based mainly in East Herts, which are the Gilson villages highlighted to the north of the page, but also Epping Forest, which includes sort of Water Lane, Latin Priory, and east of Harlow. All of these new settlements and developments or strategic sites are connected to the center of Harlow through sustainable transport corridors. And the main objective of my role was to help create a sustainability guidance that would cut across these 3 districts and help set the agenda for high quality, sustainable living. Next slide, please. One of the first key challenges in collaborative working here across authorities was identifying a baseline in which to start off. And by that, I mean all district authorities were at varying stages of their local plan, whether that be adoption or examination or still writing policy. And within each local plan, they all had varying ambitions when it came to sustainable standards. So working alongside officers in each of these authorities, we looked at the best way of identifying a base, and that primarily was through them through their declaration of a climate emergency, most of which came in 2019, between June and the end of 2019. Each declaration was also, all of these declarations were spurred on by the internal officers, local authority officers, or portfolio holders, or indeed ward councillors as well. Next slide, please. Identifying a unifying factor through carbon emissions across these districts was also key, because it allowed each authority to be able to see exactly where carbon emissions were coming from. And just to explain this slide a little bit, the dark orange is mainly residential buildings, and the dark blue is mainly transport, on road and rail transport. And so with that overview in place, and with the contribution from all officers, it helped us to collectively visually understand the reason for the sustainability guidance, and therefore how it could be applied to the quality of new builds across the Garden Town. Next slide, please. Therefore, collectively, the guidance and checklist really focused on particular sustainability themes. These were expanded and compressed alongside officers, and engaging with officers who, of course, know their local area, know their local plan, and know their local policy. The initial ambition was to look at environmental sustainability, but working with the team, we looked at expanding this to socioeconomic sustainability as well. This approach was welcomed by each borough, and each contributed what this would look like to their specific area. I won't spend a lot of time on the document itself, but overall, we had 2 goals. On the environmental side, it really focused on creating net zero developments. And on the socioeconomic side, it looked at integrated communities. Across these, we had themes. So under environmental, we looked at themes ranging from green infrastructure to the energy performance of homes, through to waste reduction and sustainable movement. While on the socioeconomic aspect, we really focused on ensuring that Harlow, which from the map highlighted earlier, Harlow, which was connected to all these strategic sites through sustainable transport corridors, that residents from Harlow were real beneficiaries of the new development that was happening around them as well. So integrating communities became became the overarching theme for this ambition. Next slide, please. Working alongside officers, we agreed the best way forward was to develop an interactive guide, an interactive PDF guide, which was clearly measurable, and therefore bringing clear guidance for how officers, for example, across the garden town can measure success, a unifying definition of success. This came about through quantitative measurables and also qualitative measurables. And we decided to use a red, amber, green color coding to help with that decision-making process. Next slide, please. This resulted in each sustainability theme having its own spread on the left-hand side, starting with objectives and requirements for each particular theme, in this case, energy efficiency. The next is a policy with policy requirements across each authority. The third section is case studies, and then the final section was a measurable checklist. The next slide, please, which gives an example of, say, the energy efficiency page. Specifically, I'll draw your attention to the green box on the first page. Here, this highlights the relevant policies across each district council. And here, officers brought guidance that was most suited to each theme. Each theme went through quite a lot of workshops, and officers came in contributing exactly what they felt was necessary here before it went wider to councillors as well. Next slide, please. The next couple of slides just really focus on example pages within the socioeconomic section, which here Harlow officers, for example, really contributed to what this needed to look like, what health and well-being, specifically building on the Harlow health and well-being strategy, could look like, and how addressing specific themes that were relevant to Harlow residents, whether that be active movement through the day, or numbers in rising numbers in obesity, but also understanding the age demographic, how health and well-being, for example, could be really integrated into the sustainable transport corridors as well as new developments. Next 2 slides, please. Thanks. That's another page that looks at the economic growth and job creation that, again, really linked to specifically Harlow. And the next slide, please, Ben. And finally, in conclusion, collaborative and interdepartmental working was a key theme running throughout the development of this guidance. From each authority identified the officers who were most suited to collaborate in each section through workshops, as well as contributing content. Then we looked at the wider industry and gaining some steering and direction from industry experts, including utilizing the Harlow and Gilson Garden Town Quality Review Panel and a wider pool of industry experts organized by the UK GBC. And then finally, the local community played such a key role, particularly through active engagement, and included a range of stakeholders, including youth councillors, again, which was really directed and led by the officers within the Garden Town. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Tara. Can you mute yourself, Tara? Sorry, because I can hear myself. Thank you. Thank you so much. That's really, really interesting. And I'm sure there's going to be quite a lot of questions around that collaborative working aspect. Next, we've got Rafe Bertram on, and Rafe is a sustainability facilitator at London Borough of Enfield. He's also an alumna and a board observer. Previously to Enfield, he worked at an architecture practice called Fosters and Partners, where some of his projects included smart sustainable cities. He worked on regeneration and climate restorative living. Over to you, Rafe.
Thanks so much, Pooja, and hi everybody. Thank you for having me here. This is a role I started in November 2019, and it was brilliant to kind of transition from the private to the public sector, and I think that was greatly helped by the work with public practice. I don't think I would have been able to do it so easily and helpfully otherwise. And now I've that lasted for just over a year, and after that I became I was always as Pooja said, always a council officer through that period, and then converted my contract from a fixed time contract into a permanent contract, and I'm still there now and greatly enjoying it. The objectives, I want to give a bit of background about Meridian Water. This is the sort of project I probably spent 80% of my time on. And so 10,000 mixed tenure homes, 6,000 high quality jobs. And my particular role is to fulfill that ambition, that council ambition of the highest environmental standards. And so the objectives was to create that strategy, but then to implement it as well. You know, strategies are comparatively easy compared to actually on the ground liaison, integration, coordinating with project teams, with developers, with contractors, tenants, politicians, and the whole team throughout the council, estate management, highways, etc., throughout the council. And I think one of the kind of most important things that we've been able to do is that, apart from which I put about 1 day a week into, is that how the work that we're doing on Meridian Water can learn from, but also influence the other suite of documents that the council is developing at the moment, how it relates to the update of the council action plan, the local area plan that's going through a Reg 18 consultation shortly to Reg 19, how these climate and sustainability issues feed into that, employers' requirements, and procurement weighting and strategy. So can we have the next slide, please? Oh, sorry, that's just come up. I mean, that's a sort of part of the relationship with the council plan. Climate action's an important part of that, but it's how sustainability relates to all of those overall council needs. Next slide, please. So this is, I mean, the first slide, that first picture is that it always feels like sustainability is a huge change management exercise, and so it feels like this always feels like this impenetrable cliff face. How do we move? How do we transition to that to that placemaking approach that is climate neutral, that is inclusive, that is a beautiful natural place to live in, and so it's how to sort of change that impression from from that impenetrable cliff face to it being easy, like walking up a hill that is aligned with politicians, the community, developers, contractors, designers, etc. So you're actually kind of making things easier, increasing investment, increasing funding, and so part of that has been, and this is where the sort of role of the facilitator comes from, is that how do you access that imperative in everybody that one works with, and finding different ways of people finding their, I call it reach back, kind of within their own, I don't know, professional background, within the sort of organizational bodies that support the line of work, whatever it is that they're working for. There's a huge amount of knowledge here, and that facilitating and empowering that empowers everybody to look at these issues much more holistically. The last thing I want to be is a kind of be seen as a sort of an expert that can kind of direct any of this. It's all about empowering and letting everybody see these issues from their own point of view. Some of the things was that the sort of maybe from a more technical level, a lot of existing work was already there. How to bring it out, how to communicate it better was really important. And working with viability, working with costing, working with funding streams, working with climate offset funds, etc., to try and kind of counteract that kind of particular pervasive standpoint where sustainability and climate action seems too expensive, and to focus on the co-benefits and the way that it can be affordable for every different sector and every different part of the country. Can you go to the next one, please? Yeah, so the strategy, this was the kind of the first part of the strategy, achieving a strategy that was not just ambitious but achievable. The brilliant thing about what councils have to do is that they have to be transparent about that, how to engage other community groups, other businesses, other local suppliers, etc. into that. I don't think it has to cost more money, but it does need a new way of working, and that's been the main role. So those are some of the main themes that we've been the highest level themes that we've been working with. Can you go to the next slide, please? But the most important thing is that it's seen as seen as a kind of a gradual step up in ambition, not a kind of that to get away from that impenetrable cliff face of difficulty and viability, is how to create these steps where just by being conscious of the issues, one can get onto that first step, and then it the ambition can increase from there. And so each part of this has a stepped approach. Can you go to the next slide, please? And so this is part of the the work within the team. I'm not going to go through all of this, but it's about governance, it's about culture, it's about procurement. That's the in-house facing role. The middle one is with developers and contractors, we're getting good value for money, and making sure that we're engaging with partners who are with us with this in this journey, and then also working with consultants and making sure that they're working really efficiently and not trying to reinvent the wheel, but just by focusing and getting on with and providing great work in a very cost-effective way from consultants is a big part of what I've been doing. Can you go to the next one, please? And I suppose the governance and the processes is a big part of that. So the activity is distributed throughout the people that we work with. And I think the most important thing here is to find processes that everybody can contribute to, that empowers a huge amount of people to give their effort into this overall exercise to progress to a more sustainable world. And one of the most important things is actually the link ups that we have with Homes England, with the catapults, with the UK 100 super organisation, with public practice, and with the Architects Climate Action Network, with the RIBA. There's so much out there, and how do we share that learning quickly? These projects are long-term projects, so you can't wait to the end of them. You have to share quickly and dynamically and get it out there. Can you go to the next one, please? So overall outcomes, we're on. It's not easy, but we're on track to deliver that strategy, on track for the project to be climate neutral by 2030. And it's tight, it's difficult, but that's on track for doing that. The aim is to be, it is an exemplar for the borough. It is helping the rest of the project, but it's done so in a kind of collaborative learning and sharing approach, and we find that through this, contractors and developers and everybody else is like celebrating what they've been finding, the achievements that they've made, which makes the whole idea of this so much easier to do. Can you last slide, please? And so maybe we can touch more about this in the discussion. What have I learned from all of this? What can I share? There's some notes the most notes there. But the most important thing, I think, is that there's so much help out there. One just has to sort of have the to be able to have the resources and the time to be able to access some of that help. I'm going to leave it there. I think that's 10 minutes. Thank you so much. I hope that's okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rose. That's bang on 10 minutes. So now we've got Nissan Shahid. Nissa is a digital first lead at Greater Cambridgeshire Planning Service and is currently an associate at through public practice. She is a planning, development and data science expert and has experience previously working in the private and third sector, including Connected Places, Catapult and Tybalt. Over to you, Nissa.
Hi, morning everyone. So I'm Nissa, Digital First Lead for the Planning Policy Team at the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service. For those of you who don't know, that's the joint planning service for South Cambridgeshire District Council and Cambridge City Council. And currently my team is working on developing the first joint local plan for the area. Now, just quickly, the context of my role itself is to develop the digital capability within the planning policy team, which is currently attempting to ready itself to move towards a data-led planning system. Now, I want to stress when I say capability, I'm not just talking about skills and people, it's also about ensuring that we have the right products and tools in place. And as part of that, the first tool that we're developing is the digital local plan. So our first joint local plan will also be our first digital plan. And I'm overseeing the technical development of the product as well as the strategic vision of moving away from document-led planning to data-led planning. This is, of course, being done within the context of the skills that already exist in the council. So I'm not coming in and bringing in a whole new team. A lot of my job is looking at what are people capable of at the moment, where are the transferable skills, and then developing a tool that fits around people as opposed to trying to get people to learn how to code. And it's also an exercise in identifying and communicating why we're moving to a data-driven system, exploring the value of data, finding where the value lies in planning data. And of course, the most important thing that underpins it all is how do we fund a digital system and how do we procure the right products to make it happen? Can I have the next slide, please? Now, the digital local plan isn't just turning a paper plan into a digital version. I'm not typing stuff up on Word and then PDFing it. It's slightly more than that. It's about creating a tool that planners can use, and planners can have control over how they present their work, what they can get out of it. It is designed by planners for planners. And of course, this means that I do spend a lot of time with the planning team trying to figure out what is it that they want. I'm not teaching them to become a code, like I said before, become a coder or just design websites. I'm focusing on what they need and turning that tool into the easiest accessible version that they would need to be able to access it. Where it is being done through iterative design, so small changes so that we can check as we're building onto it, does it actually work? Is this the route we want to take? I don't want to go in and go, here's a 3D SimCity version of what you're looking for. You have to kind of do it slowly and go, do you actually need, do you need this fancy piece of tech, or do you just need a process change? Or, are you just looking at the wrong data? There is a strong focus on collaboration, as there always should be. And that comes down to, at the heart of it, digital isn't the heart of it. People are at the heart of it. Digital is just the means to get people to do what they want to do. And with the focus of the end game isn't a fancy new tool. The end game is further inclusion and accessibility. You don't want to create something that locks users, citizens, planners, or certain demographics out of the system in favor of others just because you're on the path to do something new and exciting. Next slide, please. So just to go into a bit more detail of what this means is, but when I talk about small incremental changes, right now, when you look at the plan itself, it looks like a website. And rather than PDFs, it's HTML web pages. But what you don't see in the background is on the right side, we've got what the planner can see. So that's no code, simple editing access, which then links to the policy. So we've just gone through a Regulation 18 consultation where users can easily users or residents can access the website, look at the exact policy they need. They're able to link it across the map that we've created, so they know exactly spatially, they're aware of spatially what the policy represents to them. And then when they submit their reps, this automatically files against the relevant policy, therefore saving planners on the other side hours and hours of admin time, so they can focus on the work that they're meant to do, planning, decision making, actually looking for insights through this. And of course, this is being done in small changes as we go through the plan making process, because we're not just creating something new, we're also educating residents on how to respond, what they can respond about, how opening up channels of communications. And we're on a digital journey, and we're taking planners on this digital journey. So sometimes it's very tempting to just push on forward with new tech that's coming out, but you have to remember you're taking your entire team on this digital journey. You don't want to compromise their workflow. You don't want to stop the local plan from being delivered on time, and you don't want to make it more complicated for a citizen to engage with as well. Next slide, please. So a bit more about what a data-led system is. Our future vision is, like I said, moving away from PDF documents. We want to go towards a system where you could view, analyze, and assess real-time data. This isn't as easy as the data all exists. We know that plan documents are full of useful data that is inaccessible or in really long tables that someone who who understands it and does this as a day-to-day job may be able to find and be able to get use out of it. But to the average citizen or someone who doesn't work in directly in planning but has an interest in it, they might not be able to know where to find it, what the data means, and how up to date that data is. So what we're trying to build with the digital local plan is the bare bones of the final vision of where data can run through the plan so that we can access it real time. And maybe even better, create a real-time spatially represented visual map that could show you things like housing development in the region. If it's possible for dynamic data like cars and bikes, we've seen it being done. We've seen it being done in New York. We've seen it being done in Amsterdam. Why can't we do it for something that's not as fast-flowing as housing? So that's our final vision. I would like to stress I am only into month 6 of a 12-month placement, but the digital strategy is going to take a lot longer than that. So I'd probably go into what I've learned 6 months into my placement. Ben, next slide, please. So most importantly, focus on small incremental steps. It all adds up. When you're creating something new, something innovative, it's not about going in with a big immediately impactful piece. It's small little steps. See what works, what doesn't work. Explore what your options are in front of you. And the digital transformation is 90% stakeholder management. You're taking everyone on the journey with you. It's people understand the value of it, and to a very large extent, people do understand how to do it as well. The real skill or the real challenge is trying to get everyone to agree on which route to take together and how everyone's skills can complement one another. So yeah, it's very little. It is actually very little coding in data science and technical development development. It is 90% sitting in a room, speaking to people from all across the board about what they want to see and trying to help them realize how they can help themselves, and how you can help them help themselves with the aid of digital tech. And of course, I think the biggest learning curve has been, don't be afraid to take a step backwards when needed. Sometimes you might get excited about, oh, we could try this new thing. It might not be the right thing. Take the step, realize that it's not working, step back and go, okay, what did I learn from this? And the final one, the most important one for me, because this isn't something that's being done in the planning sphere before, it is a bit daunting, it is a bit scary. And one of the easiest things I found to do is to look at parallel industries, look at what design's doing, what are the steps being done in construction, what are, what's being done across other parallel industries that have taken a similar route, learn from their mistakes and their successes to see what could we apply in the planning system to make that reach a new digital frontier. Thank you. That's me.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting. It's so, the kind of common thread just seems so much to be about collaborative and shared working. So it's a perfect time to get Paul from Urban and Civic on board. Just a quick intro from me. So Paul is a project director at Urban and Civic. For those of you who don't know Urban and Civic, they are UK's leading master developer and was specifically created about 11 years ago to disrupt the established approach to promotion and delivery of large-scale residential-led strategic sites. Paul joined Urban and Civic in November 2021 to lead on 3 sites in Hertfordshire, including one where Urban and Civic acts as a development partner to the County Council. Paul has worked in the private and the public sector, so he worked previously as director at Places for People, but also and worked with the council there, but also previously worked in Huntingdonshire and South Cambridgeshire councils. So perfect time to get you in, and we're really interested to hear your experience of working with local authorities and what your sort of response is from what you've heard this morning.
Sure, thanks, and hi everyone. I mean, it makes me sound like a bit of a journeyman. I'd like to think I've taken a wide range of experiences, and it's really good to be here today. It should have been a colleague of mine, James Scott, who's our group director for planning, and he's really sad not to be here. He would have been if he could have been, but then we did think that I was actually quite a good replacement, having started my career off in the public sector. Pooja, like you said, Urban and Civic is a master developer, so we take land, what we kind of call raw land, and we put in the infrastructure. We take that land through the planning system, and then make parcels of service land, which we then pass on to house builders. But we'll take a really long-term interest in some of the infrastructure, and one of the things I think we genuinely do particularly well is education provision across our site. So I think this is a really important debate, isn't it? This debate about skills, capacity, resources, funding into local authorities in the public sector, and we're not alone in talking about this right now. Thanks to Homes England for putting on these sessions, and thanks very much to Pooja, you and Public Practice for hosting today's. I think both of these organisations are critical in helping to increase the skills and capacity in local government. But up front for me, really, it's in terms of delivering great places, it's about the importance of great officers within that, and I'll make the case for that as often and as loud as I can. And I think really what you're seeing from the speakers is the importance of partnership and working in collaboration. And Pooja, like you say, that's a kind of buzzword I think that's come out from all 3 of the speakers today. I feel really strongly about this. This has been my background. I think I'm quite a good replacement for James today. I started my life in growth and development at local authorities, and I had a decent spell of time there, so 15 or 16 years working particularly in and around Cambridge. And I've always been drawn, excuse me, to working on large sites. So I think the complexity and the challenges that they bring. And then as I moved into into the private sector to work with a developer, it needed to be one that had that partnership and collaboration as a core value, which is something that Urban and Civic does. I need to respond to the speakers, don't I? So these case studies are really interesting, and two of them actually are in areas that I've worked myself. I think it brings out, again, the importance of having great officers and the importance of working in partnership. Tara, on Harlow and Gilston Garden Town, I was the applicant, one of the applicants there, working at Places for People. So we worked with the teams there to help put together that sustainability checklist. And I think the main thing, I mean, you've got 5 different councils there that you're trying to work across and coordinate. So again, it needs great officers to be able to do that. And Nisa, what you're doing in Greater Cambridge, what came across for me is one of the things is, how do we explain planning? So how do we talk about collaboration and people and its different skills? And I think one thing for me is it's skills and capacity. It's not just about funding and resources, although of course that's absolutely important. So my overriding sentiment is the importance of partnership working with local authorities. Large scale schemes need that, and they are in effect partnerships. If you go back to the early days of Urban and Civic around a decade ago, the main aim there was building relationships over time. And our first site was Alconbury, near Huntingdon, which had a significant element of enterprise zones. So it was already something that had national significance and importance in terms of commercial regeneration. Objectively, to take that site through to the place it is now, needed partnership working. Steve Ingram and Malcolm Sharp, who are at Huntingdonshire at the time, I'm sure they'd agree if I said that because I've seen this from the local authority perspective, the extraordinary difference of what can happen if the trust between developer and the public sector is built. And working with Urban and Civic, Hunts District Council were able to make big decisions with no real policy support. So Alconbury, 5,000 homes, 3 million square feet of commercial space, but didn't have a policy basis at the time that we took the outline application through. And I think it's the bravery of officers, and these are things that you'll be dealing with day in, day out, but to be brave, and the officers at Huntingdonshire being brave, working with Urban and Civic without having the benefit of seeing is believing. So now Urban and Civic have got 14 sites. We've got 8 that are in delivery. But at the time we were talking with Hunts about quality and how that can happen, you couldn't go and have a look at sites that were in place. And I should say at that time I was working at Hunts District Council as I was the case officer for the Alconbury scheme. It's the same at our site at Rugby. Hulton at Rugby, a scheme that was being promoted by BT and Aviva, using what I suppose you'd call a kind of standard consultant-led approach, which wasn't really working. So again, it was coming in, putting in place a partnership, and there it was with Anna Rose, Rob Bank, Ian Davies, the heroes. So that's what we call people that we're working with in local authorities. So these are heroes taking action, taking advice, and actually moving on. And at the heart of this, I think, is public practice. So I've got personal experience working with Tara and other colleagues who are on placements, working on the Harlow and Gilston Garden Town, and the way that they're helping to drive things forward. Not exactly always entirely aligned in our views, but we kept talking. And I think, again, that comes back to the real importance of this. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that public practice survey. And Homes England as well, who are running these sessions. The work that we do in partnership with Homes England is absolutely crucial to delivering large-scale sites. So the infrastructure loans, the rolling funds that Homes England are able to set up allows us to put in place that early infrastructure to get things happening. And that's not just roads. But we do need to find a way of getting resources into local authorities, don't we? So we're happy to be part of planning performance agreements. I mean, they've still got a really important role to play in this. They're really useful. They do need to be managed, but they are important. And it's good to see that these are becoming really pretty much standard across the piece. But also, I understand it's not just about funding. It's tricky to get the right people in place. It can work. I think it can work, and we are showing this in places. And I know it's difficult now, isn't it? And the negatives get the airtime. I suppose. The positives don't always get celebrated. I'd see public practice as one of those positives. I see great officers as one of those positives. Like I mentioned, Urban and Civic's got 5 core values. Partnership is one of those. So I think you can look at a large scale site, and if it comes forward, it's a success of partnership. There's a lot of turbulence right now. Final couple of points for me. If you watch Sam Stafford's 50 Shades of Planning, or Have We Got Planning News for You? It's happening now, talking about what it's like to be in public sector, local government, and the challenges you've got with resources and recruitment and keeping good officers there. And that's why I think we need to hold up the respect for good planners, for good officers. I think for me, that's the prism I want to look through. You know, this can get us down, but whether it's through the work of PPAs, public practice, Homes England, just keeping going at this, you know, I think we can do this and make places that we're proud of. And if we focus on that, then perhaps in some ways, you know, the system can catch up with that. And a closing comment for me, just for now, and again, thanks for having me here, is the heroes we've worked at. So why not, you know, think of yourselves as heroes for today. You know, the great planners, the best planners, and I'm sure we'd probably all recognise this, are the ones that realise that planning's part of the system, part of the overall process, but it's a really important part, and it's a real bit that we can use to make great places. Thanks, Pooja. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I think, yes, we do get into that mode of it being so negative and officers' work not being really celebrated. So everyone here in the audience are all officers, and it's really important that we do celebrate the good work that is happening out there and make that visible in more ways possible. So thank you, all of you. It's been really, really interesting. We've got lots of questions coming through. So I'm just going to start with some of the wider discussions. Some practical questions about public practice, but I'll come to that later. One of the questions that came from Sarah was around some of the challenges. I think it was one of on Tara's slide deck about behavioural challenges, and she was interested to understand a bit more about, you know, hearing what added value you think you're bringing in to public sector question. And yeah, what are some, I guess it's sort of touching on the culture. I mean, I've worked in public sector for a number of years as well, and I think there is always this culture of like wanting to do better, but how did you sort of fit into that space? Anyone can take that. Tara?
I'll start. I think that's a difficult question, and so in my mind, I'm breaking it up into two sections. The first one about challenges given in terms of my experience in coming to the local authority, and then the second one about added value. And the first part was I hadn't worked in public sector before. I've been private sector all my career, so it definitely took a while to settle in, to understand the lay of the land, as it were. But within that, trying to understand this new partnership that was forming and what that meant in a practical sense for the Garden Town and for the officers. But I think critically, public practice as an organization had fortnightly R&D research and development sessions, which gave us an opportunity to collaborate with others and understand what other new officers were going through and how to navigate particular situations, which was important. And real critical for me was I was lucky enough to come into a team which the year before already had a public practice alumni working within it. And so they had laid a lot of ground when it came to the thinking regards to the importance of high quality placemaking, high quality design. So that was a battle. I felt very lucky not needing to fight in terms of what that looks like, because they had already created, for example, a vision document for all the parts of the team creating a vision document for this new Garden Town. And of course, the officers were sort of divine in helping me settle in. So I think it was definitely a challenge, sort of coming into public sector from not understanding how internally the public sector worked. And then in terms of added value, the other side of the question, I'd say, and so therefore, so just rounding that up, I think some of the challenges was definitely, I think when I first arrived in there was some skepticism to what the output would be and look like, which I think was fair because we're in the process of defining what that output would look like and be and how it would be used. And I think it was brilliant to go through the journey with officers, because collectively, I think by the end of a couple of years there, they had a very clear output and how to champion that, which I think was great. I think on the other side, added value, I think it was certainly an ambitious document in terms of the sustainability guidance we were creating. And I think the background of architecture was really useful here because of the technical expertise I brought along with me. So specifically when it came to outputs such as looking for energy efficiency standards, what say embodied carbon or operational energy targets were we looking to expect within the garden town. And so this very specific technical aspects I felt was a really useful value add within the public sector and within the team. Thank you.
Great. Did Rafe or Nissa want to add anything?
Nissa, no, I think that just it's a really good question. I think just picking up from what Paul's said, it's tough, yeah. And I think I didn't, I suppose didn't realize how tough it is and how extraordinary people in the public sector are, and learning skills that I didn't even know were skills, learning the way people, over time coordinate, collaborate, the relationships that other people have, my sort of colleagues have within the council, those relationships that have been built up through a number of years, and to sort of like step back and think, wow, that's that skill is extraordinary, that support that one's getting. And I think it's just about, in a way, it's about listening and understanding that, and kind of being humble about the work that's been going and been going on before, and to celebrate it, to sort of celebrate that that work that's already happened, and to kind of link up and celebrate more the work that everybody's doing, because it's tough out there, and that the work is tough in this bit of North London. And so and that I can that toughness and that emotional support needed can only, I can imagine that can be sort of more severe in other parts of the country. So that I suppose that emotional support, I think, is a really important thing to keep one through the battles, the everyday battles.
Thank you, Rafe. Nissa, did you want to?
I was just going to add to that. I completely agree with just having that support and just being able to know, there are other people going on the same journey as you as well. I think it makes so much of a difference, being able to kind of be like, oh, here's a problem, I don't know who to ask, but you have a network of people to ask, and that's just made all the difference.
There's actually quite a few questions for you specifically, Nissa. I don't know which one to start with. So gonna start with Lisa's question, where she asked, does your work mean that you can put a 3D CAD model on the system and get planners to develop and plan in more 3D rather than in plan?
So I was really glad that question came up, because ideally, yes, that is what we are aiming for. That doesn't mean we can do that now. And part of the reason why we can't do that now is when we discussing digital, everyone thinks about, oh, computers, we have the capability to do this, this, and this, and the vision to do this, this, and this, and then forget the simpler things such as we don't have laptops that could run fancy 3D models like that. Therefore, we would end up slowing our work down if we try to do that now. Someday, yes, the whole point of doing the local plan, working on getting the bare bones, or as DLUG likes to call it, fix the plumbing work, is being done so that we can build up to doing fancier things like dropping 3D models and working completely in 3D. So short answer is no at the moment. Ask me again in 5 years and hopefully the answer will be yes.
Thank you. And building on that, there's a question from Lucy around how would a digital local plan that is live and real time be submitted and examined by the Planning Inspectorate for PINs?
So that one's a bit more of a complicated question, simply because we're not developing this in terms of, oh, it has to fit in how PINs examines plans right now. PINs is going through its own digital transformation journey as well. It's not like, you know, it's just us working on this. It's other councils are working on this. Central government's working on it, and PINs is very much, they've got a very proactive digital transformation team that is now looking at how do we take engagement reps and can we deploy artificial intelligence and stuff like that. So the idea is, if we developed a real-time digital plan tomorrow, we wouldn't be able to submit it to PINs as it is because they're not ready to accept it in that form. But that doesn't mean they won't be at some point. They might, we don't know what that's going to look like. It might be they change their methods, or local plans themselves change altogether. Possibility, I don't know what the next 10 years are going to look like, but it won't be what it is today. All we can do right now is just, and this comes back to the collaboration thing, it's not just collaboration within our own department or within the planning team, it's collaboration across councils, collaboration with PINs and stuff to upgrade the entire planning system, not just this one product. And if we're going to move to real-time data, it will have to be the entire planning system that will have to gear up and get ready for it. So again, it's one of those questions. Ask me in 5 years and I will have a more concrete answer. But right now I could just tell you we are all looking at creating that process.
Great. And the last one, so I'm just firing them all at you to just get them all the digital questions out of the way. But there's a question around the PropTech funding from DLUG about piloting online citizen engagement and how you think this links up digitally engagement-wise.
So we actually were one of the winners of the first round, and we're specifically looking at how can we use a geospatial platform to collect social media engagement, so that we can capture all the comments that fall outside the formal engagement process. Part of this is to see if we're trying to get groups that don't normally engage with the planning process, or feel like they can't or don't know how to. We're trying to take a more proactive approach to, okay, then we'll go out and listen to your public Twitter conversations around this stuff, so that we can again take residents on this journey of, so this is how you can influence what the area would look like. We hear you care about, an example of swimming pools. Our social media work before has shown us that residents really care about swimming pools, but it's not something that they would not write to us in a formal representation. But because we know that this is an important aspect of it, we've been able to go out and speak to them and actually make it part of the plan. And this has been done because we're using a slightly more slightly fancier tech solution to be able to go out and listen to wider conversations rather than sitting and waiting for people to respond to us. So the work that we're doing isn't just, oh, we're just fixing the local plan. We're also testing little projects to see what can we do that just goes just slightly further to make life easier for the residents that we serve, for the people we're building for? What can we do to that? And part of this pilot project, the beauty of the funding that we're all receiving is it doesn't have to work. It just needs to be tried, tested, and then learnings fed back. We might turn around and go, actually, you know what? We didn't come up with anything useful. And that in itself is an important, and the fact that we've got the funding to do it as well, because if we went forward with our own funding and tried a project like that and came up with an unsuccessful result, we'd probably get into trouble, and digital would have been kicked off of the agenda completely. But DLF being able to fund that means we can go, we can test, we can speak to other authorities who are doing something similar, see what works for them, and we're all. It's not just us doing this one project, it's 10 of us doing different projects, all learning from one another and going, okay, could we use that for the next iteration, the next change we're going to do? By the way, here's the stuff that we did. Maybe you want to try that as well. So, and that's how we see that funding fitting into the work that we're doing.
Thank you. And on the note of, I suppose, community engagement and accessibility, we know from research, the most recent report that came up from the Urban Design Group around capacity, that actually the lack of capacity is one of the key barriers to being able to do meaningful community engagement. Tara, you mentioned community engagement and youth involvement in your work briefly, because we only gave you 10 minutes. So it would be nice to hear a little bit more about how you undertook that with your in your team with that process.
Thank you. I think this is an interesting one, and actually I think it does link into a question that's been asked in the chat about sort of dealing with the decision-making process in local authority. I think certainly with this project, I ended up understanding the real meaning of stakeholder engagement, and actually it was critical here working with local officers who already had those relationships that Rafe highlighted earlier, between each other, between departments, authorities, communities, councillors. They suddenly became front and center, because throughout the creation of this particular document alongside officers, it wasn't something that was done in isolation and then delivered at the end. The structure was defined with officers and with, at a particular point, with councillors, for example. And as it was developed, engagements and community engagement became more and more important before the formal engagement process. So through workshops, obviously we were all on Zoom at the time. So through online workshops, councillors certainly came in with very specific views. And because this particular document cuts across so many themes, councillors were very specific about what they wanted to see within a particular theme, which was important for us to understand. It was again officers who reached out to particular, for example, we spoke to youth, but youth representatives of each authority, so Harlow, Epping Forest, and East Herts, and we reached out to them, and they were sitting on the call, identifying what was important to them, and also it was important to understand why things worked for them, and how we sort of engaging with the younger group under 16s, for example, were happy to walk until it was time to drive, and or walk or cycle, and it was time to drive. And not only, yes, okay, their friend lived in the next town up, but actually the cycle path ran out, and that was the reason they stopped cycling, not because suddenly they wanted to do something else. So gaining that understanding of exactly why those behaviors had changed, even from a young group of people, was such an important part of the process, and then helped us tweak and refine exactly how this document ends up looking and being.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to just touch on the note of collaboration again, because I just feel like everyone's talked about that. That's definitely coming out on the theme in the chat. We had last week we had the winter learning session as well, which is a more strategic conversation, and this was meant to be the deep dive. And one of the comments actually from Sarah Carey, who is Director of Place at London Borough of Enfield, was saying, actually you need the resource and capacity and time to even be collaborative and to be able to you know, to be able to carve that space to work in partnership and share learnings and so forth. So I guess through public practice, we carve that space and create places and spaces for the cohort to come together every other Friday, but also, like I said earlier, wider offices to come together. And just on the point that came to touched on earlier, the chat around us being how do we deal with procurement and recruitment. Fundamentally, public practice is not a recruitment agency. We are a placement program, and we bring that collaborative working and sharing of learning together, and therefore we don't come across some of these procurement issues because we're not a recruitment agency. We do much more than that and support that shared learning. But I guess if there was any kind of, we're almost at the end of time, but if there's sort of top tips for how do you make sure that you create time to be able to reach out, or how can you be clever about this, because we know how busy and stressed officers can be at a day-to-day basis. So maybe I'll start with Rafe.
How to create time. I think one of the ways to do it is to get something from it. You know, you can reach out, but if you're reaching out and learning and it's part of your role and your job description, then it's kind of you're sort of doubling up. So I suppose the interactions there are these groups around, you know, the country, like, you know, for instance, the Good Homes Association the Good Homes Alliance is an extraordinary group, and that I go to that organization with colleagues and with colleagues from other councils, and it's a huge exchange opportunity, so that and it's not kind of, in a way, it's not extra time, because it's what you know learning, and you know, if you can borrow somebody's document and change the title of it and to have it as your own, you know, that's saved a week's worth of work. And that so that kind of, and that, you know, whether it's UK 100 or there's, you know, UK Green Building Council, and you know that there are many of these organizations around the UK that you know, people have suggested to me that we've got in touch with, and it's through that collaboration that you can actually kind of make your life so much more effective and save a huge amount of time. I don't know if you want to go to someone else, Pooja.
Yeah, Lisa, Tara, any last kind of words on that?
I was going to say, a lot of my job does require seeing what other people are doing, and I think, yeah, it is part of my job description to do that, so it's fine. What I found more useful, though, is taking my colleagues every now and then, and sometimes it's like junior colleagues and stuff, to to a meeting about some new product, just so that they're aware of what's going on. Maybe take them to slightly more to all the meetings where we will be discussing digital and what other councils are doing, just so that other people are aware as well. So yeah, there's like, everyone's willing to talk. I find people are always willing to have that conversation. They really want to know more about what's going on, what you're doing. Everyone's got 30 minutes for a quick chat, especially these days. Just 30 minutes, online chat, the Teams call. Let's find out what you're doing. I'll tell you a bit of what I'm doing. I think one of the most difficult things after that is, how do we turn that conversation into an actual collaborative project or something to bring it all together? And I found the best way to do, at least for myself, has been just keep following up until a project comes up, or something new comes up, like, oh, should we team up and do something together? Or I've had this terrible event at work where this has happened, can you suggest something? And just keep those lines of communication open, so that you leave lines for collaboration open too.
Great. So I'm going to just ask Paul for the sort of last word on this before we wrap up the session. So Paul.
Thanks very much. I mean, I think this is fascinating, and that's not to dismiss that it's absolutely, you know, at the forefront of people's minds, because this is something that done wrong can really affect the way that we work. I mean, to me, I think we've got to ask ourselves, do we think we'll get better outcomes out of partnership and collaborative working? Because if the answer is yes, then you have to assume that that is the way that we will work. And there's a little example I've always had, which was from when I was working at South Cambs Council, and we were working with one of the developers on one of the fringe sites at Cambridge. And they kind of said, look, I've tried the partnership and it's not working, so we're going to go back to normal. And you think, well, no. If you see partnership collaborative working as something that you can just kind of use and then toss aside, it means that you're never really going to work. So when I don't say it lightly, you know, we've got one of our corporate values is partnership working, and I put it into my personal development goals when I started at Urban and Civic in the last few months. And that means for me, it runs through what I'm doing. I think if we haven't got that, there's always going to be that little risk that it kind of gets put to one side. So that will be my main thing. If we really think this is worthwhile, then we have to make sure it's a real core part of the way that we work day to day.
Thank you. I think that's a really lovely way to end this conversation. So just for me to say thank you so much to Tara, Rafe and Nissa for your case studies, for hearing about your work on the ground. Thank you so much, Paul, for your time and seeing it from your perspective. I'm just going to say a quick thank you to the public practice team who work really hard in the background.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pooja, and all the speakers for such an very informative session. There's lots in there for us to go away and look at, and there's plenty of links in the chat as well, which we'll make sure that we share around with everybody. And thank you to everyone who joined us today for giving up your time and for all your comments.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you again.
Bye.
Thank you.